Guys, I'm Delaney Workman.
I'm Jared Samuels.
And welcome back to another episode of What's Behind the Game. Today we have one of my best friends, Brett Hintz, on to talk about his show, The Sports Walk with Brett. And we also have some sport topics we're going to cover. So welcome, Brett.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Doing well, man. So my first question is what is your show about, and why did you want to do a podcast about sports?
My show is The Sports Walk with Brett. I do an hour long show every Wednesday at 2 p.m. on KVRX about football. It's really over any sort of football topic that I feel like talking about. And it's funny you ask why I wanted to do it. I actually didn't even I wasn't even planning on getting into it. I started writing for the Daily Texan in the fall. I cover soccer and football for them, and I had just released my first 2 or 3 articles, and the manager at KVRX, or a manager at KVRX, DM'd me on Twitter, and he was like, "Hey, I read your article in the Texan. I really liked it. Do you want to? We have we have a slot available to talk about football, or we need someone to talk about football at KVRX. So do you want to do that? Do you want to have your own show?" And he texted me that, and I was like, "Dude, yeah, of course I want to do that. I like talking about." I'm very opinionated whenever it comes to football and things like that, and I like watching and I like writing about it. So he reached out to me, and that's why I have a show, is because they reached out to me. But I also have a show just because I've always listened to sports radio, even growing up with my with my mom and dad. They always had sports talk radio going on in the background, whenever I was in the car. And so talking about sports and having your own show has always been something that I always thought was really cool. But now that I got the opportunity to do it through KVRX, it's definitely something that, I feel I find a lot of joy in doing, is talking about football on the radio.
I have a question. So do you only talk about UT football, or do you talk about professional and college?
So yeah, whenever they approached me, they're like, "We need you to talk about football," and I was like, "Okay, so what kind of football do I need to talk about?" And they're like, "You can really just talk about NFL, college football, anything you want to." And so on my show, I write it, I write the show, I edit it, I produce it. The only thing that KVRX does is they post it on Spotify, and they post it on their Instagram page. So I can really just talk about whatever I want to talk about, really. But mainly we do about, me and Steven, we do about 25 to 30 minutes of Longhorn football. And then usually we'll do 30 minutes or so of NFL football, but it really just depends on the week and really whatever we want to talk about.
Nice. So have you always loved sports, or is it just football, or what would you say your sports journey is?
Oh yeah, growing up, I played football. I played every sport except for soccer growing up. So I've always had this vested interest in just sports in general. I played baseball, football, basketball. I ran track. I did all these things growing up, and I've always been. Anyone that knows me knows I've always been super opinionated on sports and really just anything in general, but especially sports, just because I grew up in that way where it was every Sunday. Both my mom and dad are super passionate about the Cowboys, and they're super passionate. My dad's super passionate about the Rangers, the Stars, all these kind of things. So I've always had this passion for wanting to talk about, or for wanting to watch sports, and then also wanting to talk about it. But then you combine the two with the medium of being on the radio. That, like I said, that's always been something that I've wanted to do. So I guess that's sort of my sports story, is growing up around my parents and also playing sports growing up. I've always had this sort of, inkling of wanting to talk about sports.
Mm-hmm.
So we know you're from the Dallas area. What are your favorite sports teams?
My favorite sports teams are mainly Dallas area teams. They're actually all Dallas area teams, other than outside of UT, obviously, because that's where I go to school at. But the Dallas Cowboys, the Dallas Mavericks, the Dallas Stars, Texas Rangers. Those are all my favorite sports teams, and of course the Texas Longhorns. So I would say those are my favorite sports teams.
Sports.
Yeah, hook 'em.
Hook 'em horns.
Speaking of, let's talk about UT football. How do you feel about the season?
Oh man, that's it's a weird question, and it's also a weird season. It's such a Texas football. They are, I believe, I'm not sure their exact record right now. I believe they are 5-4, I think, somewhere in that area. But it's been a weird season because if they win the next 3 games, they can go to the Big 12 championship and have a chance to win that and go to a New Year's Six bowl and be really good. But it's weird if you watch it because, yes, they're winning. They're on a 4-game winning streak right now, but they also just don't look very good. Me and Steven talked about this today on our show, is that they're winning all these games, but yet they come out and they just don't look like a very good football team. And a lot of that has to – and them winning their games has a lot to do with the teams that they play basically sort of giving the game to them. And we watched the West Virginia game together, Delaney, and I was like, dude, like, if they would have just, like, caught this pass, like, we're going to lose. Like, we should be blowing this team out. And that's been basically the story of Texas football all year, is that this is the year that they came into it with expectations of playing for a college football championship, or at least being in the Big 12 championship. And now they're here and they're sort of in this weird area where it's like they've underwhelmed all year long, but they still have the chance to save things and salvage things. So we're really going to find out a lot more about how we should feel about this Texas football team in the next 3 weeks. But if I had to use a word to describe this season, I would definitely probably use weird, as things are with COVID and just how football has been playing out in general.
Yeah, and I definitely agree, because UT, like, they play down to their opponents and then they'll, like, beat OSU, who is undefeated. So it's crazy.
Yeah, and that's like been the biggest. That's been like the biggest sort of thing about Tom Herman's tenure, is that they have no issue beating teams like Georgia, and they have no issue beating teams like Utah, or they can beat OU, or they can beat the good team. Like, we've seen them, they beat USC, and they came really close to beating LSU. It's not these big games that they have trouble getting up for and playing. It's the games against like TCU or Iowa State or Kansas State that Texas has historically had problems throughout Tom Herman's tenure and winning those games. And so that's why I feel how I feel about Tom Herman, is that, it's not the big games that he has trouble winning, but you can't really expect to be in the Big 12 championship and competing for a championship or competing for a college football playoff spot every year whenever you're constantly losing 2 or 3 games a year to teams like Kansas or Kansas State or TCU or Iowa State or teams like that. So yeah, you're absolutely right. They have no issue playing up to the competition. It's just the teams that they play that are worse than them, they often play down to their level.
So do you think they'll keep Tom Herman? What do you think?
That's been, I don't know if y'all paid any attention to his press conference yesterday, but he came out and basically said that he's been talking, him and Chris Del Conte have been in constant communication, and Del Conte has reassured him of his job status and his job security, and that he thinks that he's doing a good job. And that was real controversial, because there's a lot of people that pay real close attention to Chris Del Conte's Twitter account. And if you've been paying attention to his Twitter account, he hasn't tweeted about football in like 2 months. And so people are like, okay, so he's sort of given up on Tom Herman, and we're looking for a new coach. But then Tom Herman says what he says in the media, and we're, as observers and people that talk about it on the radio, we're not real sure on whether he'll be back next year. But if you're asking me how I feel about it personally, I think that, yeah, we need a new head coach, especially now that Urban Meyer is available. Possibly, like, whenever you have a coach like that, or a coach possibly that might be in that tier, I think whenever a coach like that represents such a clear upgrade for your program, I think that you have to sort of go out and make that happen if you can do it. If not, if you can't get a coach like Urban Meyer, and if you have to settle for another coach that might be worse than Tom Herman, then you should probably keep Herman. But like I said, there's 3 more games to this in a Big 12 championship, and if Herman runs the table, it's going to be hard to fire a coach who just won the Big 12 championship. So we'll see.
True. So what do you expect with UT basketball?
That's what I haven't really done a lot of paying attention to UT basketball. I know this is Shaka Smart's year, where a lot of people he's sort of in that same boat as Tom Herman, where if he doesn't, he has these expectations going in to where if you don't see a lot of postseason success, he might be gone. So I know that's the expectation going in. I honestly, I have no idea just how this year is going to play out in terms of wins and losses. I think you might know more about Texas basketball than I do, but I do know, and I do think it's worth talking about that. And I think it's notable that he's sort of in that same boat that Herman is that this is the year where it's basically, it's make or break it for him. And if Texas basketball stumbles out of the gate and they aren't very good, sort of like they've been in the years past, this might be the end of the line for Shaka.
Yeah, I was hoping 2 years ago Shaka would be moving on. I think COVID might have saved him a little bit. It was rumored about 2 years ago that they were going to get rid of Shaka, but I don't think they could buy him out of his contract.
Yeah.
So I definitely think COVID has saved him. and actually.
Yeah, and I think that's where we're at sort of with Herman, and that's why I think it's so interesting is because I've talked with Steven about it multiple times, and he's like, it's a COVID year, it's a weird year, the buyout's going to be expensive, and it might just be way too much money to buy him out considering we're having to save so much money due to COVID. And I'm like, dude, like it's a weird year, yes, but everyone is playing with these conditions. I mean, like COVID is something that we've had that not only Texas football has to deal with, but this is something that you have to deal with everywhere. And so I think Shaka is sort of in that same sort of tier. That's why I think it's notable is that they both sort of have this excuse of a COVID year, but then again they also are like their leash is sort of getting shorter, and I think there might not be any more room on the leash if they continue to not be what they're expected to be. So we'll see.
I think too, like UT's academic program is very wealthy. So when it comes to buying out coaches and stuff, I don't really see where the issue is there.
Yeah, that's another notable thing. I'm like, whenever I was talking about Texas, and I keep relating it back to Texas football, but Texas football, I think I saw a number is that they're like the most wealthy football program in the United States, like across the entire country. So money, and while yes, COVID has definitely taken away some of those funds, and you're not having as many fans in the stadium buying tickets and all that, and you definitely are seeing a downturn in revenue. Texas is still Texas. Like they have more resources than almost everyone else in the entire country. So that's why I don't put much stock into the COVID year thing, because I know Chris Del Conte has already proven that he's serious about winning. And if he sees a better coach that you will have to spend a little bit more money on to sort of maybe buy out your old coach and also bring in a new one, I don't think that he's scared to pull the trigger on that. So I definitely would agree with you that, yeah, UT, like they have more money than almost literally anyone in the entire nation. So it really shouldn't even be an issue if you're talking about moving on for a new coach.
All right, well, now we're going to talk about a topic near and dear to me. I've been a fan for the Dallas Cowboys and this season we're having. What are your opening thoughts on that?
My thoughts on the Cowboys season? Oh man, my thoughts are that I miss watching Dak Prescott play football, and I think this season has sort of shown us as Cowboys fans that it's kind of shown us just how inept the Cowboys front office is for not already extending Dak 2 years ago. And so now we're having to go into the offseason this year looking at the prospect of signing him to a $40+ million deal, and he's also got a broken ankle. So we're sort of in a bad position, but I'm excited for a top 5 draft pick. What do you think?
Yeah, I think the problem, I mean, it's too easy to say Jerry. He just doesn't get the right infrastructure in place.
Oh yeah, that's been the common mantra around Dallas for as long as I can remember. Like I said, I mentioned earlier, I grew up listening to sports talk radio. The mantra here for the past 20 years, as long as I can remember, is Jerry the owner needs to fire Jerry the GM, and it's like that's way of thinking sort of gets tired because that's not going to happen. Jerry's going to run this. He's going to drive this boat until he dies. So it's definitely going to be interesting, like I said, to see what they do because I think they should get a top 5 draft pick. I want to see them trade that draft pick and build that into a really good roster. But like you said, Jerry is going to be the GM for this thing, and we'll see just how capable they are of pulling something like that off. I don't know.
I would like to see the defensive coaching do better too.
Oh yeah, Mike Nolan he's been bad all year. But then again, it's hard to blame him just because if you look at it last year, like if you look at it with Chris Richard and Rod Marinelli, they were bad last year too. Like the defensive side of the ball wasn't good. And then you look at it this year, it's really the same personnel. They even kind of got better with their personnel outside of losing Byron Jones, and they're still bad everywhere. So I talked about this pretty strongly, and I think in either the second or third episode of my show, is like, at what point do we start pointing fingers at the personnel? Like, at what point do we start blaming Jalen Smith and Leighton Vander Esch and and really the front office who's responsible for putting the personnel on the field in the first place? So while yes, the coaching has been lacking and suspect, I think the bigger issue probably is with the personnel. And that speaks volumes just to how your front office performs in terms of, in terms of being able to build a team. And that might be more cause for concern than just a coach, because you can just replace that, So people in the front office are going to be the people in the front office for as long as Jerry Jones and Stephen Jones are in charge, which is going to be forever. So,
yeah, we paid D-Law and we paid Jalen, and we paid all these guys already, so we're stuck with them. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that D-Law, like, I don't have an issue with DeMarcus Lawrence. Like, DeMarcus Lawrence has probably been our best defender. I mean, he doesn't have the sack numbers to back it up, but he's so valuable in the run game. And so I don't have an issue with the contract that we gave DeMarcus Lawrence, but that Jalen Smith contract looks so bad right now, just because he doesn't even look like a serviceable linebacker, like a replacement level linebacker. So when you look at, trying to justify giving somebody that contract, it really is hard to do so, especially whenever you watch him week in and week out look extremely just like not even a replacement level linebacker. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Those contracts are coming back to bite us in the butt.
Yep. So have you been keeping up with the NBA offseason?
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on all that? Harden to the Brooklyn Nets and.
Man, that is going to be super interesting to see. Because I don't know if you saw the Drew Holiday trade yesterday. Drew Holiday was traded to the Bucks yesterday for 3 first-round picks and like 2 pick exchanges, and also for like George Hill. And if that's what it takes to get Drew Holiday, I can't imagine what it's going to take to get James Harden. That James Harden return, I don't even know if like the Nets have enough assets to trade for James Harden. So I'm definitely interested in to see just what he would demand back in a trade. But he seems like he wants out of Houston. So that's exciting just in terms of if you want, or if you like find a lot of interest in watching teams like, LeBron's Heat and the Steph Curry and Kevin Durant Warriors. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how that plays out in terms of like what the super team dynamic is there. But then again, like I don't even know how they can go about pulling that off. They're going to have to give up so much. But if they're able to do it, then like it's going to be interesting to see how Brooklyn shares one basketball between James Harden, Kyrie Irving.
Yeah, that'll be enjoyable.
Oh yeah, for sure. It'll be fun to watch for sure.
And no bench because they'll have to get rid of.
No, yeah, that's what I'm saying. The Nets are like so confusing because I thought they were a 7 or 8 seed in the East this past year, despite not having Kyrie or KD. So I thought they were. I mean, that's a pretty big indicator that you're a pretty well coached team if you're able to go to the playoffs with an extremely underwhelming roster. Like, who is their best player? Like, I can't. Like, was it LeVert? I think that was probably their best player last year, and they were able to be a 7 or 8 seed. And so I thought they were pretty well coached, and then they go out and they hire Steve Nash as head coach, and then they have a bunch of other assistant coaches that are brand new, and they're just confusing. So, I'm interested to see how Kyrie Irving, Steve Nash, Kevin Durant, and possibly James Harden, like how that mesh, like how they're able to mesh within that. Like, I'm not real sure how they're going to be able to manage all those new personalities, but it's definitely going to be entertaining television to say the least. Like, even if it doesn't work out.
Yeah. So where can people learn more about your podcast?
You can listen to my podcast every Wednesday at 2 p.m. at kvrx.org. Or if you're in Austin and you're riding around in your car, you can switch your radio station to 91.7 KVRX and listen to it. Or you can follow me on Instagram at Brett Hintz with 3 T's. And you can go to the link in my bio, and it is on Spotify under the KVRX Sports Network. So if you want to listen to an hour of football content every week, me and Steven Wagner, we put a lot of time and effort into the show. And like I said, if you want to listen to the show, just go to kvrx.org at 2 p.m. on Wednesdays, or just go to the KVRX Sports Network on Spotify and just give me and Steven an hour of your time. And I promise you'll be more educated on football than you were before. So that's my sales pitch to your listeners. And also, yeah, my Instagram is the Sports Walk with Brett for my show. So if you want to get live updates on my show and when we release new episodes and things like that, follow that Instagram and you'll get the latest and greatest news on the Sports Walk. So
great. Thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah, for sure.